Hey guys, I thought we'd do a quick little tour of the greenhouse that I have in my kitchen, actually. I live in an apartment and I love plants. I love to grow plants, propagate plants, anything plants. I do have an Etsy shop where I sell some of my plants, so I do like to have this greenhouse where I have a place to store them and help them grow faster and be able to propagate them quicker and list them on my shop. So, Uncut Plants on Etsy and Instagram and YouTube now. So, thanks so much for watching, and let's get into the greenhouse tour. So, first off, this is Monstera albo or Albo Monstera. This is the mother plant. I originally got this plant back in 2020 and it was a stick, it was a leafless node, and I grew this plant out and then I propagated it back in April of 2021, I guess. And I have cut this plant back twice now. So it is currently finally regrowing again. This was the first leaf it actually put out after propagation. And then this leaf is a little bit more balanced. And it's getting ready to push out a new leaf. I find Monstera albo to be pretty easy to grow. I haven't had a whole lot of problems with it. I've grown it in several different kinds of substrates, different conditions. In my humble opinion, I'm not a botanist. I'm just a hobbyist, a person who likes to grow plants and learns as I go. Don't mind my dog shaking in the background. But if you can grow a green monstera and propagate a green monstera, in my opinion, you can grow an albo as long as you can provide it with enough light. And then next we have an anthurium seedling. This is a anthurium pappy crossed crystallinum, I believe. Yes, pappy crossed crystallinum. And I've been buying or growing it, sorry, since March of 2022, so about a year now. This is its newest leaf. It's really interesting. It may have had some pest issues going on, and I have treated this plant, so it no longer is showing those kinds of signs or symptoms, but it's interesting how different those two leaves look, right? This leaf looks similar to the newest leaf, but this leaf, when it came out, it wasn't showing a lot of venation, and I was kind of excited that I was going to get this long pappy type leaf, very belate, but it did end up showing some more of the crystallinum traits in it. But I do love how the lobes pinch together up at the top. I think that's so cute. Whether that's a leaf deformity, I'm not sure, but I love it. I think it's adorable. And then this leaf over here. It's growing in pon. Seems to be pretty happy. I have struggled with this plant a few times, but it's finally, it's sizing up and it's trying. So we just keep pushing through. Back here we have a Hoya fitchii that is growing. Don't mind all the hard water that I get on this greenhouse, but it's growing up the pole. And then it's growing along this side. If you're looking for a very jungly, viney Hoya fitchii is such a fun one to grow. Sometimes these leaves will grow up. I actually just propagated this plant and cut a vine back, but they'll get right up here by these lights and they will sun stress so pretty. Next we have Anthurium luxurians, and I love to show this plant off. It's just one of my favorites. I love how dark this plant is. I love the texture of this plant. I love how easy this plant is to grow. If you're on the fence about the price or if you can care for it, if you can grow you know, any other anthurium, this anthurium tends to be extremely hardy, and I think you will be just fine. We do have some older leaves that are starting to go, and we're getting a new leaf right there. I probably need to get it into a bigger pot. I do tend to grow a lot of my plants in closed systems or, you know, no drainage type vessels. I just find that with my style of plant keeping, it just suits me really well. And this plant is actually growing in straight, like a straight orchid bark mix. So you'll see some perlite in there and some orchid bark, maybe some charcoal pieces, lots of sand in there. But it seems to be very, very happy. So I am pretty excited to keep growing this plant, Anthurium luxurians. Next we have a dirty, it's got hard water all over it from when I water, but this is a Hoya chinghungensis, and you guys, she is wild. She is a wild girl, and I love every bit about her. Oh, look at that peduncle. Look at that one trying to open. Oh my goodness, I love her so much. She is such a fun plant to grow. And I find that if I cut her back, like if I propagate this stem, it will activate more growth at the base, and that's when I get some of these new little shoots coming out. I think we do have another peduncle. We have this little peduncle going on right there. It's getting pretty close to opening, so that's pretty exciting. And then down here, this is a Philodendron gloriosum. Some of the older leaves are starting to get kind of ratchet looking, but it's definitely sizing up, and it's so pretty. It's getting a new leaf. And then we just have some Hoyas and some plants down here that I need to deal with. This is a plant that I'm very, very excited about, and I hope I can kind of reverse some of the bleaching that I've done to it. But this is Syngonium mojito. I don't know why I said it like that. Syngonium mojito. So I'm pretty fortunate because my mom is a plant person, and I actually got a propagation from her. So her plant was this leaf and this leaf, which when she cut it, they looked much better than they do now. But it's given me this new leaf, and then this new leaf. And I actually had it in my plant cabinet, and it was getting way too much light. So I have just recently moved it out of my IKEA greenhouse cabinet and put it down here where maybe I can try to get some of those darker green specks on this plant back. But we'll see. If I need to propagate it at some point, I will. But it's pretty happy. It's extremely rooted in there. Look at those roots. Look how furry. And then I don't even really want to show you because I've got water spots all over these poor plants and I need to clean them. But this is Hoya numeroroides. I can't say it. And a Publicalyx Hawaiian. And then down here, we'll go back to some of the funner ones, but this is a propagation of Philodendron biliaceae. I had it in a propagation bin, and if I don't do something pretty quick, I'm probably gonna lose this cutting, so I definitely need to do something about it now. And then we have an Alocasia maharani down here, and its leaves are pretty massive. I love the feel of this plant. I would really love to get the Alocasia mellow, just because I love the color, but the texture is it's the same. From my understanding, Alocasia mellow is actually a hybrid, I believe, of the Maharani and possibly the Black Velvet, maybe? Can't remember. I'm not sure, but it's a hybrid and I would love to own it. Back up here to some of the funner plants. This is another propagation of Philodendron gloriosum. And this plant is actually growing in pon. Check out that algae in that pond. Pretty crazy. Probably need to get it out of there, but it doesn't seem to be too bothered. It's getting a new leaf there. But this was actually the first philodendron gloriosum that I owned. And I tried to propagate it for my mom, and I had actually given this plant root rot. I didn't realize I had until after I cut it. And then we had these little chunks, and some of them had no roots, and my mom actually managed to save this. I left this one with my mom, and she saved it, and I lost my cuttings. And then she had other gloriosums, so she ended up giving this back to me, and I just can't seem to part with it because it just has this cute story, and I love that my mom saved it for me. So this gloriosum will always have a special little place in my heart, even though I have this big mama over here. And then back here we have a propagation of Anthurium, oh my goodness, of Monstera albo. This is actually a propagation of a propagation from this mother plant. But this was a top cutting that I took, and I loved the sectoral variegation on this plant, so I did save it. It had this marbling on this side, and then the sectoral on this side, and it's given me a little bit of both, so I am really loving that, and I'm really excited to watch this one grow and be able to take some propagations of it in the future. You can see it is getting a new leaf. It's got that little bump right here on the petiole where you can see a new leaf will come right there, and it's extremely rooted. Check that out. I probably need to get it in something else. I love sphagnum moss. I know a lot of people don't love sphagnum moss, but my plants love it. I tend to grow my plants very well in it. I love to add amendments. I love to add cocoa chunks. I love to add pon. I love to add leca, perlite, anything in there. But I do love to grow in sphagnum moss. And then this is one of my philodendron Florida beauties. I actually have another one over here. And this plant is a propagation of this original plant back here. So this propagation put out this leaf, and I just absolutely fell in love. Man, it's hard to talk so much on a video. So bear with me because this is my very first YouTube video. So please be patient with me, and hopefully I'll get better as time goes on. But this plant gave me this leaf, and I fell in love, and I couldn't sell it. I couldn't get rid of it because I just needed to know what this plant was going to produce. So let's see. It gave this leaf, and then I believe this leaf, which is stunning. I love how it has that all green lobe. And then this leaf, and you can see the lobes are maturing. One is more mature than the other. It's so cute. And then this leaf, which is getting extremely mature. But I didn't get it on a pole soon enough, and so I've actually been making some shorts and some Instagram reels about this because I did have some people over on Instagram asking me why I recommended you put your philodendron Florida Beauty on a pole stat. As soon as you get a chance and you get a couple leaves, I would recommend that. And it's just for the sole purpose of the way the leaves are positioned. If you let it grow without a pole, the leaves grow in a rosette shape, and then it's hard to find a place to put a pole. So currently I've changed its position, and I've got the light up here facing towards the front in hopes that all the leaves will face that direction, so then I can put it on a pole. But this is its newest leaf, and check out that like half, it's hard to see, has that Polaroid variegation that develops over time, but you can see the right half of the leaf is a lighter color than the left half of the leaf. And look how mature those lobes are getting. So I'm hoping that now that I've put this moss collar on, the roots can start to root into there, and it will hopefully help support this plant and help it continue to mature. All the way back here we have my Anthurium veitchii. Oh, a plant just fell. Hang on. Anyways, back here we have Anthurium veitchii. And I've had this plant. This was one of the first Anthurium, rare, and I think this was my very first Anthurium actually. And when I originally got it, the leaves were quite a bit littler even than this. It was a pretty small plant. And it's definitely sized up. We've got this leaf back here. But this leaf was its last leaf. And then we have this new leaf up here. I'll insert another clip, but look at that leaf. Oh my goodness, this plant is so cool. Those abs. It's just such a cool plant to grow once it starts sizing up and getting bigger. And it's really been pretty easy. Down here we have a Ripsalis. This was a propagation off one of my mom's plants, and I'm sure I need to look up the name, but it's just sitting in a little cup of pond, sitting in a ramekin for a reservoir. And it grows wild and crazy, and I love the way it looks. I'll try to speed this up a little bit just because we can go more in depth about these plants down the road, I guess. I'll just give you a little tour of what's in here. So this plant is Anthurium magnificum. And I love this plant so much. I've just recently pollinated it with itself. And I'm not sure. I mean, this inflow looks like a few of those berries might start to produce. But in the meantime, I'm just waiting to see what it does. So this leaf is so belate. I mean, look at how textured that leaf is. I love it so much. Under here, we have a Philodendron tortum that was actually propagated, and I sold some cuttings on my shop, but we are getting a new growth point right here. I did find this plant to be extremely easy. I got it as a tissue culture plant, and it was very, very small, and it sized up and grew so well for me. So I'm excited to get my beautiful mature leaves back on that. These are two of the cuttings of that plant actually, and I have sold one of them, and I'm actually shipping it out tomorrow. This one right here with that growth point. So I need to get it in some sphagnum moss and get it ready to go to its new home. But check out those roots. Incredible, right? Those leaves get so big. They're so beautiful, and they're so fun to watch unfurl. Here we have a little Philodendron melanochrysum. Right here we have an Alocasia odora variegata, and there are actually two plants growing in here. There's one plant and two plants. But I gave this plant root rot on some of its newer roots, I don't know, back in the fall. And thankfully I did catch it, and I got rid of all the root rot and started over. But it did cause some yellowing on some of the leaves. So we're getting new leaves now though. This is a new leaf and it looks great. I love how this white leaf has that little speck of mint up there. It's so pretty. And then we have the Alocasia dragon scale, and there are two plants in that pot as well. There is another Ripsalis growing down there, and I don't know this one's name either, but it's doing great. Then we have an Anthurium crystallinum right here. I have a whole story about this plant where I took a propagation off my mom's plant, and now it's just producing a crazy amount of leaves. It's got like 4 or 5 new leaves coming in, and it's extremely rooted. There's one back there. And I need to get it into a bigger pot before it starts to decline, because it did have some struggles with its, I mean, it got like 4 new leaves last time, and it did struggle a little bit. So I think it needs a much, much bigger pot. Right here we have a little Anthurium forgetii seedling. I've given this thing root rot a few times, and that new leaf is not looking very good, but this seedling has struggled the whole time I've grown it. And I just don't give up because I really would love to have a beautiful forgetii, but I finally got this leaf and it's finally starting to look a little better when you compare it to the other leaves. So I'm just hopeful. It's just growing in a little tiny cup of soil. I grew it in sphagnum moss and pon, and it didn't do very well in either of those, so I moved it into soil and then it started to perk up a little bit. So we'll see what happens. You know, some plants just are not going to be the best plants you've ever grown, and that's part of what I love about the hobby. I just keep trying, and you know, if I have to start over and get a different one someday, I will, but I have forever to grow plants, so I just keep trying. We have a Hoya Bella. I actually just moved it over here, but it's got some blooms. It's so pretty. It's currently just growing in a cup of sphagnum moss that dries out constantly. But it's been a really easy Hoya to grow, and I love that it loves to bloom. So that's a fun one. And then a Scindapsus exotica that needs some serious water. And this is Hoya sibitingensis. And then this is a Herpers, no. I don't know, that's sounding pretty dry. I probably need to go soak that bad boy. I tried to put this in an upside down hanging cup, like a tassel fern, to see if it would do well that way, but it's not, and it sounds very dry, so I need to give that thing some water stat. My mom actually went to Hawaii and brought that back as a souvenir, so I really need to save it.